You're listening to Workplace Perspective, an employment law podcast raising the bar at workplaces everywhere. Workplace Perspective is a regular podcast series for employers and employees focusing on education, training, and the law to help organizations of all sizes develop and maintain successful workplace relationships. The opinions expressed by guests on Workplace Perspective are their own and should not be considered legal advice. And now, here's your host, Teresa McQueen.
Thank you, James, and welcome everyone to Workplace Perspective, where we are striving to raise the bar at workplaces everywhere. Today, we are talking with clinical social worker and psychotherapist Nadine Durbach about the emerging awareness of addressing mental health issues in the workplace. We'll be talking about why it's so important for leaders to be talking about this issue, and we'll hear Nadine's tips for those who may be suffering and in need of support. It's going to be a great show. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
Workplace Perspective has a new website. Visit us at www.workplaceperspective.com. Check out our new look, including our featured guests and archive sections. Share us with your friends and colleagues to help us continue to raise the bar at workplaces everywhere.
Welcome back to our listeners and welcome to Workplace Perspective, Nadine Durbach.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
We're so excited to have you on the show, and I'm happy to be talking about this topic once again. And Nadine, before we get started, why don't you just tell our listeners a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Sure. Well, I am a clinical social worker, and I have a private psychotherapy practice in Newport Beach, California. I am a part-time lecturer at Cal State University in Fullerton, and I'm a mom of 3 young adults.
I love talking about this issue because I don't think it's talked about enough. And I think that from a legal perspective, I think that leaders in the workplace are always in the best position to see changes in employees or to be told of changes in employee behavior, which sort of triggers their duties under California law to find out if there's anything going on. Is there a need to inquire about the possibility of a reasonable accommodation or something? But beyond that, so many people before the pandemic and now with the pandemic and coming hopefully out on the other side of that, so many people are suffering and it's really come to the fore. So I think it's a wonderful opportunity to have this kind of a conversation about mental health in the workplace and how that's evolved and what's trending, where we think it's going, what's helping. So I think it's really important that we have this conversation and seeing it more and more in the workplace on social media. So I wanted to kind of get your perspective on how we've kind of gotten to where we are today with this sort of emergence of awareness.
Yeah, well, I think if we look back just, 40 years to the 80s, and we remember how corporate America really understood that if they took care and supported their workforce in their physical health, right? Remember Jane Fonda and aerobics and leg warmers and, the workplace was becoming a space for taking care of ourselves physically. Okay. And so we saw the emergence of come to work and donate blood, come to work and take your blood pressure, come to work and stay after work and do an exercise class. Come to work to see smoking, right? Smoking cessation classes. And corporate America supported that and jumped on that bandwagon. And today, 40 years later, we understand research and science has been telling us for years about the connection between mind and body and soul. And I think that corporate America in the 21st century understands that their workforce's mental health, psychic and cognitive health, emotional health is just as important as physical health. And so we are now, post-pandemic and realizing that all of us survived a global crisis. And for many of us, it felt like a trauma. And one of the ways that we can support the workforce is to really shine a light on vibrant and vital mental health.
I agree. We've had conversations about this on the show before, and I think it's such an important topic. And I think that it sometimes seems that we have an idea of who the professional we think we are, right? We have this idea of ourselves as a professional, and it's different for leaders. It's different for mid-level supervisors and our frontline employees. It's tough, I think, to make that transition that I can be that vulnerable in the workplace, that somebody could see the cracks, and what it's going to do, and that fear. And there's all kinds of fear, which manifests itself from a legal perspective. I think rightly so. There's still some idea out there that in a way mental illness does get perceived as making you weak or something. But I've always thought it's the idea that when you've gone through something that's impacted your mental health, it makes you stronger. Do you find that?
Most definitely. I think that, personally why I love what I do for a living. I am a strengths-based therapist, and I'm constantly looking for what my clients bring as their, what I call superpowers, their innate strengths, their capacity to face adversity, overcome challenges. And I think that, not to say that we should be supporting a culture of mediocrity, but I definitely see that in social media, in sort of the trends out there, that there's a movement towards being good enough. And I think that if we can reinforce, at least in our corporations, in our institutions, this idea that fine is the new phenomenal, right? Especially in this post-pandemic state that's emerging. Fine is the new phenomenal. That's good enough. I think it allows all of us to take a deep breath and lean into our humanity, lean into the idea that we're just, little people in this massive world trying to do the best we can with what we've got when we've got it. And I think that leaders in the workforce can take a stand for that. And I have clients that work in some of America's biggest corporations, and I'm hearing from them, really from the front lines, that their corporations are recognizing these ideas. And somebody just yesterday was telling me that they had to take 3 mental health days, and those are considered sick days, that there's no difference between a mental health day and a sick day. And so I think that is starting to emerge, and that is being recognized.
I think that's great. I think it's a great trend. And we're going to take just a quick break, and we come back. I want to talk more about that, why it's so important for leaders to be talking about this issue. So hang on. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back.
Take a step toward bringing our country and community together. Start a meaningful conversation at lovehasnolabels.com/one-small-step. A message from StoryCorps, Love Has No Labels, and the Ad Council.
If you enjoyed today's show, do this. Share us, like us, give us a review on your favorite podcast app. It means a lot to us, and it ensures more people tune in and raise the bar at workplaces everywhere.
Welcome back, everyone. We are talking with Nadine Durbach about the importance of addressing mental health issues in the workplace. So let's talk a little bit about that, why it's so important for leaders to be talking about mental health and this idea of sharing their experiences if they have any. I've heard that a lot. And again, that goes to that vulnerability. But I do think that with most things in business, it trends from the top down. So if leaders are vulnerable and talking about their experiences, it's going to allow employees all the way down the line to be more expressive and to be more comfortable addressing the issues that they're having. So what you just started talking a little bit about, you've seen that, you've kind of heard that. Can you tell us a little more about that?
Definitely. I think it's good for the bottom dollar to recognize that mentally vibrant, vital, healthy employees represent a mentally vibrant, vital corporation or institution or office space, workspace. And so I think just if we don't recognize any of the humanity benefits, we're only looking at it through a financial lens, I think it makes financial sense to be providing resources and services for employees and their family members to support them through their mental health struggles. Many mid-sized and larger firms have EAPs, employee assistance programs, and all kinds of resources and services. Many of the larger corporations today having facilitated yoga classes at lunchtime and, mindfulness, breathing programs where people can go and learn how to, access their own breath as a tool for enhanced mental well-being. I am aware that many corporations are giving employees a mindful minute during meetings, for example, to just kind of clear the space and clear their cognitive landscape, as we call it. So there's all kinds of ways for any size organization to start to incorporate the idea that your health in its totality is important to us.
It's really interesting. I love clear, that cognitive phrase that you used. I love that. I think it's really interesting. We did a show on grieving, and it was not at all what I expected it was going to be. Because I thought, well, grieving, how many times do you end up with death or loss in the workplace? But it really wasn't about the physical death or loss of a coworker or a family member or something. That it was a revelation. I don't know why it was such a revelation to me that there are things that happen in the workplace that we grieve. We grieve
all the time.
Yeah. A loss of a project, the end of a project. I mean, I used to do special events, and at the end of a big event, there was always this sort of letdown. And now I realize it was kind of grieving because you put so much time and effort and energy into something and it's done and you grieve for that, or it's taken away and you grieve for that. And I think from what you're saying, it sounds like even that might be some of the things that leaders are starting to recognize. At least I hope they are. That sometimes what happens in the workplace, decisions get made and then you're just expected okay, project's done, next thing. Or, well, we're taking this away, we're giving it over here. You now need to get on with things. And that not taking a moment to realize how that truly impacts people's mental space, right?
So it's that on the one end, and on the ramp up phase, the anxiety that comes with being tasked with something new, right? And for leaders to be able to start to use this language that evokes a sense that we all of us are on some level coping with the ramifications of, mental health. Like we say, the struggle is real. And so to be able to recognize the excitement and the opportunity and the anxiety that comes with a promotion, preparing a presentation, standing in front of a group to share new ideas, being responsible for a team, right? That in itself is very anxiety provoking. And that's just who you are when you show up from 9 to 5 in the workplace. Never mind the anxiety that you might be experiencing because there's a whole host of other things happening in your personal life. And so there's also that idea that what we struggle with on the home front in our personal lives, it doesn't get left at the front door of the building or in the garage parking lot or in the elevator. And then, as you say, the can't quite hands around at the end of something. Or if something never manifested in the first place, we were going for that promotion and we had imagined being that type of employee or that type of leader, and that never came to fruition. Or, the dismantling of a department. And so that depression and anxiety is something that we all confront throughout our careers. And I think showing up as leaders to name that and engage in that conversation is vital.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's right. I forget about the other side of that. The good things that happen to us that are still anxiety provoking and scary and all those things. Well, correct. I want to switch gears for a minute, and I want to know if you have any tips that you can share, or thoughts that you can share for those who may be suffering in the workplace or in need of support. What are your thoughts on that side of things?
Well, I think that it's really important to be able to recognize that there might be something that, isn't sitting right with us, to be able to, probably reach out to somebody and state the need for help. Many of us are facing what we perceive as high threat. And so when there's high threat, there's typically high anxiety. And when we have high anxiety, we just can't function in the way that we're used to or in the way that we're expected to. I think it's really important that in workplaces, just like there's posters posted with ADA, American with Disabilities Act information, and 1-800 numbers to all kinds of governmental or corporate entities, I think there should be information of it made available on mental health resources. And I actually have an excellent list of mental health resources, national mental health resources, that I'm happy to share with your listeners and can provide that for you so that you can put it up on your site. And I think just being, courageous enough to say, I'm not okay, and it's okay not to be okay. And to recognize that feelings don't define us. Feelings are fleeting, but feelings are little red flags. Feelings are little warning signs that something isn't quite right. And just to be able to say that is a starting point for a conversation. I would encourage people to, access YouTube videos or a mindfulness app on their phone, just so that they can learn how to breathe. And we can do that anywhere at any time, in the supermarket lineup, at a gas station, stuck in traffic, in a meeting, on a Zoom call. Just accessing our breath is very, very grounding and can really bring some heightened focus and calm to who we are. And like I said earlier in the show, just recognizing like, oh, that was good enough and I am good enough, and using good enough as the bar for excellence, I think can really help and support people in their mental health journeys.
Absolutely. I think those are all great suggestions, and we'll get those up on our site for people. One of the things I want to say from a legal perspective for employees, especially, is to remember that when we're talking about being open and being vulnerable and raising your hand when you need assistance is not the same as saying you need to disclose to an employer what your underlying medical condition may be or what your underlying mental health condition may be. That's not what they want to know. They don't want to know that. What they want to know is if you need assistance. So the idea being you can be open enough, but it's being open enough to say, just to raising your hand, say, hey, I need some time. I need some time. Tell the employer what you need so you can have a conversation about how that may be provided. But there is nothing out there that would ever require you to disclose an underlying condition to a worker, to a coworker, to anyone in your workplace at all. So keep that in mind as well. And hopefully that'll lower some anxiety about raising that hand and, waving that flag that, hey, I got a little bit going on here. I might need some help. In our last few minutes as we wrap up the show, do you have any words of wisdom or some thoughts for the future you'd like to share with our listeners?
Thank you. I do. I think that the pandemic was a space in which many of us were struggling. Many people continue to struggle. I think that, research today is taking a good look at what we call the negativity bias. And it's so easy to get sucked into like a vortex of negativity. And that's not to say that, things are not going so well. But I think when we identify that things are difficult and we're having a hard time, it's also imperative that we look for silver linings. It's also imperative that we look around and say, all right, I recognize that is not going so well and that I'm struggling in these areas, but what is going well? What do I see that is a positive or a plus? Where are my successes? How can I count those as well? I think it's important that we all, are responsible for giving ourselves a big atta-girl or atta-boy, just really, really, really be able to recognize that we are doing the best we can with what we've got in the time that we've got it.
I love it. Thank you so much, Nadine. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for sharing your thoughts and your wisdom with our listeners today. We really, really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
You can learn more about Nadine by visiting her website at www.nadinedurbachlcsw.com. That's NadineDurbachlcsw.com. You can also connect with Nadine via our website at workplaceperspective.com. I want to also thank our listeners, My Radio Angels, James and the Knave at Night, and Workplace Perspectives team extraordinaire, our engineer and producer, Paul Roberts, our associate producer, Melissa DeLacy, with music provided by the very talented Stephen Versaloni. Thank you all for joining us on Workplace Perspective, and until next time, keep raising the bar.